father, your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, your family, your community, the things that they told you. At the end of the day, this whole presentation, I could shut up and leave by saying treat one another with respect. But I flew a long way to be here, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually present. Now, if you don't have common sense, please ask for assistance. There are people scattered around the room who do have common sense. Raise your hands and you can find one of these individuals and ask them if you do not understand what I'm about to say. All right? All right, with all that, let's go. Now, when you think of protocol, many times what comes to mind are these grandiose settings, right? Oh, this beautiful banquet, this state banquet that Her Majesty the Queen is hosting for somebody. Oh, this sumptuous meal, that's just wonderful. Or we think of an ambassador presenting his or her credentials to a chief of state. Or we think of what just happened in Japan, where a new emperor came to the chrysanthemum throne. And there's this big elaborate ceremony that takes place that ushers in this new emperor. Or we think of what happened really recently right here in Bangkok with the ASEAN summit taking place. These are all things that you think about when you think about protocol. But many times when people think about, particularly lay people think about protocol, they get a little bit frightened. They think I'm going to come in and tell them, you know, you're doing this wrong. It's bad. You shouldn't be doing that. No. What really you're trying to do is create a set of conditions for diplomacy to succeed. That is the simplest definition of protocol. Creating the right conditions for success. But then there are some times when, despite a protocol officer's best intentions, the principal goes wild. Now, principal in diplomatic terms is the person in charge. Principal can be a president, can be a monarch, can be a prime minister, can be a minister, can be an ambassador. The principal. This is when the Prime Minister of Canada paid an official visit to India and decided for his entire visit to dress in native garb. And look around at the Indians in the photograph who are not in native garb. He didn't do this one day. He didn't do this 2 days. He did this 4 days of his visit and was absolutely pilloried in the press, both in India and in Canada and around the world. How many of you saw this or heard about this? Oh my. There is such a thing as trying too hard. Right? We're going to talk about just a little bit about be your authentic self. This is not authentic. Now, I get why he's trying to do it. But when you show up for 4 days in a row and clothes you would not normally wear because you want to make an impression, you are making an impression. But ladies and gentlemen, it ain't the right impression. Or this was a long time ago, but this is what was fondly called in the American press the hat speaking from the podium. Because no protocol officer decided to check and see that Her Majesty could have a line of sight to see anybody. Now, what was really worse is this is a still photograph. The video camera was a little lower, so all you really did see was her hat. And you hear her voice from the hat. And former President Bush, who just died, sitting up there like, well, there's nothing I can do. A good protocol officer would have checked this out. And then this one. How many of you are football fans in the room? Right? So this was at a Copa event. This was the Uruguayan national team. And they got ready to go out, and you look at their faces. They played the wrong national anthem. I know. That's bad. That's really, really, really bad. I didn't put it in here, but the worst example I've ever seen of that, there was a qualifying event for weightlifting for the Olympics. And I will not name the country that this happened, but if you're really curious, you can YouTube it. Where a team from Kazakhstan won. And the organizers looked up the Kazakh national anthem, and they took it off YouTube. That was a mistake, because what it pulled was the Borat movie version. If I'm lying, I'm dying. This is the absolute truth. And they played it, and you could watch the tears come down the Kazakh national. They didn't understand the words. They just knew that wasn't their national anthem. I'm glad they didn't understand the words. If you've never heard it, please don't listen to it. It will offend you. I'm sure. All right? These are all mistakes that happened in protocol, and I could go on and on and on. Some of you may remember at the London Olympics, when the North Korean women's soccer team took the pitch to play a football match against I don't remember who, and they put the flags of the two countries up there, and they put the South Korean flag. And the North Korean team said bye, and they walked off the pitch. These are all big, big mistakes that make headlines, but there are ways to avoid them. We're going to talk about some of those. But mistakes are inevitable. They happen. JJ talked about it earlier today. We all make mistakes. It's really about how you recover from those mistakes, what your service recovery is, that makes all the difference. I apologize for showing this photograph. Comma, but. This is real. This is a minister in a government and in a country I won't name, Italy. You can see the flag. She is sincerely signing the book, the oath book, after taking the oath. JJ, you know this, right? You've seen this, right? Yes. So she is signing the oath book. Now, folks, listen. Right is right and wrong is wrong in some things, but here's the deal with those kinds of situations, what a protocol officer always tries to avoid. Never make the story about anything other than the principal wants it to be about. That's what your job is. Your job is to make sure that every possible thing is in order, so that the story the next day is the new government gets seated, not everyone looking at the seat of a new government minister. And that's what becomes the story. It's like when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and he came to the U.S. on an official visit, and President Obama then received him, and he gave him a gift. And President Obama gave him first a set of, let me tell you what the Prime Minister gave. Prime Minister Gordon Brown gave President Obama a pen and pencil set that had been carved from wood. But this wood wasn't just from any ordinary place. It was from the sister ship of a ship called the HMS Resolute. The HMS Resolute was the ship that Queen Victoria decommissioned and from which timbers were made, the desk in the Oval Office behind which the American president sits. The sister ship of that HMS Resolute was a slave rescue ship that literally patrolled the waters off Senegal, off Gorée Island, and would attack ships laden with slaves to go heading to the West Indies in the Caribbean, and rescue these individuals and then send them to England to live as freedmen and women for the rest of their life. So they commissioned this gift to give the first president of color in the United States from the sister ship from whose timbers behind the desk he now sits. Somebody put a lot of thought into that gift. You know what we gave? A box of DVDs of American cinema that did not even work on British technology. With my hand up, that is the truth. All the media covered that entire time was that gift faux pas. They didn't talk about what Brown and Obama talked about. They talked about this gift mess up. So that's what a protocol officer wants to avoid. How many of you remember as a little kid playing with glue? Little things and try to get together. So the word protocol itself is Greek, protokolos, and it means to glue together, to bind together. The root of the word literally means binding things together. So if you don't learn anything else about diplomatic protocol, if you don't remember your rules, if you don't remember who stands on which side, if you don't remember your order of precedence, if you don't remember which fork to use, if you don't remember to put a flag, remember that the job of a protocol professional is to bind things together. And we're going to talk about how to do that in just a second. Now, I went and surveyed some friends of mine who have kept their diplomatic passport after I turned mine in. I will say, those of you who do want to travel or want to be a diplomat, it is kind of fun to travel on a diplomatic passport. I'll say that. You know, it's nice to bypass all the lines and go through, and but that's a mild perk. The bigger perk is helping people. That's a bigger perk. That was funny. You're supposed to laugh. So I went and asked them. I said, "What are some tools that you think?" I had my list, but I wanted to talk to practitioners very contemporary in the field. What are some things you think that folks need to know? And our list mesh, and we're going to go through a few of those things today. Now, the first one, something JJ mentioned briefly, precedence. Precedence. Now, I just said something about the only rule. If you're going to remember one technical thing, it's precedence. Everything in protocol is based on precedence. Everything. Everything, all things, everything, all things, 100% everything. Until it's not, but all the rest of the time it is. Where people sit. Where you stand in a receiving line. Where flags go. Who gets the toast to them first. Who gets introduced to whom. Who gets what level of gift. All of those things are based on precedence. So when I say the word precedence, what comes to mind? Anybody? Free-form association. Y'all have been talkative up to now. I'm going to caffeinate the whole group of you and have coffee and tea come and serve you.
I can give legal precedents and like higher courts and things.
All right, legal precedents. What decisions that inform what's happened in the past. All right, I saw a hand over here. Thought I did.
It was the same.
Yep, same. One over here, yes.
Like tradition?
Tradition? Tradition. All right, hold that thought. Anybody else? No? Yes?
I was just going to say precedence is just what something has happened before.
Something that's happened before.
If someone gave a great gift last time, you wouldn't then come in with a crappy gift this time. Because the expectation is that you get
Aha! Once it's been done, it's expected thenceforth, right? Precedence at its core is a simple ranking of two things. Number one, it's a ranking of people, countries, places, whatever it might be. It's a ranking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who's more important than whom? It all goes back to the Congress of Vienna in the 1830s when the warring heads and crowns of Europe got together and said, you know what, we're tired of every time we conquer another country. We're tired of changing the stationery, printing new business cards, doing all that kind of stuff. We're just going to come up with rules about who is important, and we're going to have these rules be uniform across all kingdoms. Spain, Portugal, France, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Britain, etc. So they got together in the 1830s, and they said, congratulations, these are the new rules. A king outranks a duke, a king outranks a prince outranks a duke outranks an earl, and etc., etc., etc. And that's how it all started. Now, whether or not we agree that Europeans should control the way we think about precedence in 2019, that's where it started. Everywhere you go, though, has precedence. How many in your family come into a family event and you know where you are supposed to sit at the table? How many know where your grandparents sit? How many know where your parents sit? That's precedence. You don't take the place of the senior elder person in your family, right? Be that your grandmother, your great-grandmother, your grandfather, your great-grandfather. You know exactly where they go. And that's what this is. How do we rank people? All right? So, this is the Roman Catholic Church. These cardinals didn't just get up that morning and decide, let's walk in this order. They're ranked according to precedence. The person who has been a cardinal the longest is at the front, and the next longest, and all the way to the very junior person. That's what precedence does. So if we were to rank, how can we rank people in this room by precedence? What's one way we could do it? Age. By birthday. We could start with the oldest over here and go to the youngest over there. That is a ranking system. That's precedence. What else could we use?
Academic.
Academic. Well, in what way?
We can start with the higher ones, with the PhDs, and then the masters, and then the bachelors, and then the
Absolutely. We could rank like that. How else could we rank?
Height.
Height. Absolutely. Yeah.
Length of service.
Length of service. Absolutely. In fact, there are lots of ways that precedence is done by length of service. I've been ambassador for 4 years, so I outrank somebody who's been here for 3 years and 8 months. How else? We could choose an arbitrary system, right? We could say alphabetical order by, if we all put our names in some sort of French version of our name. It's an arbitrary system, but we could do it. We could say furthest traveled to get here. Who's come the furthest? How many kilometers are you from home? We could say by number of brothers and sisters that you have. And then the tiebreaker or the number of cousins that you have. The point with any precedence system is you have to be consistent. If you choose one, you gotta go the whole way with it. Whatever you choose, take it through to the end. So if you're gonna put precedence by ABC order, then use an ABC order. If you're gonna put in precedence by length of service, do length of service. The UN goes usually precedence in alphabetical order by the English alphabet. That's where the flags are usually displayed, not always, but that's a lot of times what happens. But not in the Security Council, for example, because the Security Council has a rotating chair, right? Who ranks first, and everyone else comes in rotation. That's their precedence. So the point is, always be consistent. This is a court. In the U.S., it's the Supreme Court. They didn't choose just to sit that way. The Chief Justice is here, and then the next eldest, or excuse me, the next longest serving, and the next, and the next, and the next, and on the back row they do. Same way. Here was a bilateral between the President of China and the Chancellor of Germany. And the people ranking out from there, I could look at this picture and tell you who ranks most important. This was the funeral of former President Bush. These presidents are seated in reverse chronological order. Current incumbent, Obama, Clinton, and then, of course, Bush wasn't there, the younger Bush, because he's in the family section, and Carter. There's a precedence to everything, an order. So that's all it is. Just remember that. It's an ordered ranking. Everything else will be a whole lot simpler after that. All right? Now, I heard a question. Oh, yes, please.
Hello. I was just wondering, so often when you see groups of leaders at ASEAN or G20 summits, so often the most powerful nations' leaders, such as the US, are in the middle of the group photo shoot. Is that specifically done, or?
So it's not supposed to be specific. Did everyone hear the question about, you've seen these they call them family photos at summit meetings. And they all come out with the host, and they all sort of jockey for position. Who's going to be in the center of the photograph with the host chancellor, the host prime minister, the host president, whatever the case may be. Technically speaking, there's a precedence order there. So let's take the G20 or the G8, for instance. It rotates by chair who hosts it. And so your precedence should be out from there. So if France is the host and then Canada is the next host, then the president of France should have the prime minister of Canada right next to him or her. But in theory, what happens is the host nation wants to make a political statement about who is standing near its prime minister or its chancellor. So you'll see they have these toe marks down, and they're all going to where their toe marks are. So the prime minister of fill-in-the-blank country, Australia, could decide, you know what, it's advantageous for me right now to have the president of China by me. So I'm going to put the president of China by me. And that's how it happens. It deviates from consistency and but what it does is create a political message, right? So it's a very good catch. The easiest, cleanest thing to do is, hey, we're just going to go in precedence order. But that's not what they want to do. They want to create a political statement. They want you to notice that they have this person next to him. And then a poor country, small country, I mean poor in economic sense, but a small country like Vanuatu, it gets left in 15th row, 7th position in, just because they're a small country. What precedence is meant to do is to avoid distinctions among countries like that. All of your home countries, your diplomatic corps foreign ambassadors who are at residence there. The way they rank themselves is by order of service. Who's been there the longest is the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, and it goes all the way to the person who has most recently presented their credentials to the Prime Minister, or the President, or whoever the head of government, or Chief of State, is. And so they always line up that way. They go to official functions that way. But it doesn't happen when you get higher than those. It's a good question. Other questions while we're here? Yes?
As president means a factor that can put every single individual in a group into order. Let's say, what if the president of this room, let's be gender, like maybe half of the room are female, half are male. So in that case, can this be a president? Since they cannot cannot put every single individual in order.
So if the group agreed upon it, but then you'd have to have some way to sub-order that, right? So if you pick something that was, binary or had only 4 or 5 solutions. So let's say we had 6 basic hair colors, and we divided everybody into those 6 basic categories of hair color. Well, then when you get everybody in that area, you got to still find some way to rank those 13 people who are there and these 20 people who are here. So, I mean, it would be difficult to do. That's why you need tend to think a little bit more specific. How everyone shares a common thing. Everyone shares a family name, not shares the same family name, but shares the characteristic of having a family name, so you can alphabetize on a common alphabet based on that. All right? Other questions? Okay. Now, I heard this question when JJ was speaking about the use of your excellency, or what do you call somebody. How many of you have ever been at a loss for what you actually call somebody? What do you wind up doing? Sir? Ma'am? Let me tell you, there's no problem with using sir or ma'am or madam anywhere in diplomatic parlance, anywhere around the world, period. End of story. And it saves you a whole lot of time, fuss, trying to remember, am I supposed to call this person your excellency? Am I supposed to bow to this person? Am I supposed to kiss this person? Am I supposed to shake hands with this person? Am I supposed to curtsy to this person? Just say sir or ma'am and move on. That being said, there are some people who really like their titles. Who asked about academics? Somebody asked earlier about academia. And what was your specific question?
It wasn't really a question. It
was more of a statement because some of my lecturers really don't like being referred to as sir or ma'am. They like their full title because they went through so many years of study, so they like people to use it.
That's right. And so the general rule in protocol is if somebody tells you that this is their name, that's their name. What possible good could you have by going to the mat fussing with them over what their name is? Right? You waste oxygen trying to convince somebody that they don't need to be called professor, doctor. Right? In the United States, where I'm from, you can't have a double honorific, which means an honorific is what goes in front of your name. So you can't be the Reverend Doctor. You can't be Professor Doctor or Doctor Doctor. That's just not what we do. Is anyone here from Germany? Nobody's from Germany? What? Germany, it's common to have a double honorific in front of their names. If somebody has 2 doctorates, they're going to go, Frau Dr. Schmidt. And they want that to be on their place card when they're coming to dinner. Like, you can't fit all that. No tiny little calligrapher going in here, Frau. That can't happen. But who am I to argue, right? I mean, if a woman walked in this room right now and said, I am the Pope. Well, look, I'm not going to debate theology with anybody. But unless the Roman Catholic Church changed its rules overnight, a woman can't be Pope. So, well, what am I going to do? Fuss at her? And waste my valuable time trying to convince her she's not the Pope? Now, I only tell you this because I've had it happen before. I've had people come up to me and tell me they're hereditary princes. And I'm like, really? Of where? Like, you were raised 4 blocks away from me. A hereditary prince of what? Pine Street? I'm actually not joking about that. That is a true story that I can tell you about later. where people have, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that protocol officers sometimes face. How many of you have ever heard heard of the Aga Khan? Has anyone ever heard of the Aga Khan? The Aga Khan is a hereditary title to a descendant of a brother of Muhammad, Ismaili Islam. These are Ismaili Muslims. And Aga Khan, I did a program where he came to Atlanta, and we did a 3 or 4 day event, did something at the Carter Center with President Carter. And 2 of his followers insisted that I call them their highnesses. And came in, and I got the name card, and in his name it had an exclamation point in it. Now, I speak English as my native language. There is no sound for an exclamation point. And I looked at it and I asked my staff, I said, how do you say this? And they said, I don't know. I said, well, let's call the State Department. So we called the State Department, and the desk that handles this, they said, no problem, we'll send you the phonetic pronunciation. Great. They emailed the phonetic pronunciation, and I promise you this is what it said. It had the first syllable, dash, and the second syllable, dash, and then in parentheses it said, sound of an exclamation point. Literally what the word said. And then it had dash in the last one. I thought, what in the world? So finally we called the embassy, and let me always tell you, people at embassies and consulates are really, really, really eager to answer questions about their country, about how to display flags, about what the custom is for gift, whatever it might be. So always use those resources. But we called it and they told me. So I recorded them. I said, can I record it? So I recorded on the phone. Yeah, got it. Good. I practiced and practiced and practiced, and we had 50 ambassadors. We were on a bus. We were heading to the governor's mansion for a huge event, big dinner, out of under a canopy, lovely evening. And we're going through the great reception hall, and I'm introducing each ambassador. And it comes up to this one. Y'all, I'm sweating like a sinner on Judgment Day. And I'm worried about what's going on. And here he comes in with his beautiful wife, who's very accomplished. She's a medical doctor, and she's been so friendly. And he has been kidding me the whole time. You're going to mispronounce my name. I know you are. So I said, Governor and Mrs. Perdue, may I present to you the ambassador of the country, and I said the name. And this gentleman stops in his tracks, and he turns around to me, and he comes with arms wide open, and he gives me a hug. And he said, my son, I have been in your country for 2 years, and you were the first person to pronounce my name correctly. And I said, oh, don't clap, it gets better. He asked the photographer to take a picture of me with him, not with the governor. The governor's in his tuxedo looking at me, and I'm like, because, as JJ will attest, the number 1 rule of protocol, don't be in the picture. Like, don't. I used to tell my team, if I see you in the paper or on social media, like in the Twitter account of the governor or the secretary or the president's photograph, assistant secretary general, and I see you in there, we're going to have an issue, right? And there I was. He signed the menu card and handed it to me, and I thought that was great. It was wonderful. We stayed in touch until he left the U.S., so yeah.
I need to know, how do you pronounce an exclamation mark?
So yeah, it's a click of a tongue, but it actually matters what follows it, is what I was to understand. So it's got a little click of a tongue. I can't do it as well now because I'm out of practice. You know, it's like muscle memory, right? It's gone. So I haven't worked that muscle like that in a while. But the point is, know how to pronounce the name. Now everyone's practicing. And it's okay if you don't get it right the first time. Listen, people want you to pronounce their name correctly, right? It's like if somebody gets your name wrong, and they repeat it back to you, and you let it go, that's your fault, right? At that point in time, that's on you. Because they don't want to get your name wrong, let them know. No, actually, it's whatever your name is. I didn't mean it like that. All right, and then the final thing is, what's their president's order? If it's a delegation coming in, you want to know how they rank themselves. You don't want to have to do the math yourself. If I had to come in here blindly and try to decide who's the most important person here, Whoever waves money at me is I'm going to choose. How am I going to choose who's the most important person here? Right? I need to know. And it's the same thing if you got businesses coming in. Google has a position called the Chief Happiness Officer. Now you tell me where that ranks in a corporate structure, right? Chief Happiness Officer. What do they do for a living? I want that job. They play with puppy dogs and have, lovely days on holiday and taste testing menus coming in. Like, well, how do you rank these people? So you let them tell you the most important person, okay? All right. Uh-oh, is it stuck? Did it die? And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Well, that works. This doesn't work. What? Okay, we'll go back to your excellency then. Here, I'll let you play with that and see if you can make it work. And then your excellency is what is the standard diplomatic title. In fact, long ago, the only people who were entitled to use your excellency were representatives from one sovereign country to another. That's where the title came through in the Congress of Vienna. So when the Crown of Britain decided it would send somebody to the Crown of Holland, that the way they did it was they used the honorific your excellency. So your excellency would represent the monarch. Now it's ministers and lots of other people. But ambassadors are always known at residence in country as your excellency. Okay? Oh.
Excellent.
All right. Now, this may seem corny, but how many of you have ever been to an event and sat down and were miserable because you could not see or hear anything? Now, I have to commend the UN for putting a room like this, because in this room you can see one another. You can see across, you can hear. It makes sense. They're not afraid of shapes. But sometimes we go to meetings and there's just straight lines, and you can't really see or hear everybody. What, is it still not working?
No, it's working. Apparently.
Your magic. Your magic. I'll take it just a second. So part of this with seats is you need to take as a diplomatic officer, as a young diplomat, if that's the way you want to go, you need to take the initiative to make it is working. Not this. Well, now, I don't know what it's doing now. There we go. Now, how many of you have ever been on a plane and you couldn't wait to get off because it was like this? Some of you may have this kind of flight coming over. Oh, who's got scar tissue over here? I heard yeah. Who flew? Okay, all right. How many of you had at least one connection to get here? 2 connections? Oh, anyone had 3 connections? Seriously?
Yeah.
From whence did you come?
Canada.
What part, eh? No, I'm sorry. And Canadians are never offended by that because they know they say sorry more than any human on the planet. Where are you from?
Toronto.
You had 3 connections to get here?
Yeah, long story short, my flight got canceled,
Oh.
so I had to figure that out, so that's why I had 3 connections.
Oh, I got you. Okay, well, bless your heart, man. I'm so sorry. I had 1 connection I thought was a long trip, so I can imagine 3. What cities did you connect?
I went from Toronto to Vancouver, from Vancouver to Taipei, Taipei.
Oh, are you doing the same going back?
Oh no, I'm gonna have 2 connections.
Oh, okay. 2 flights.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. And I'm sorry. I'm seriously sorry. I didn't mean to say, hey,
No, it's not
I love
offensive.
Canada. How many of you have been to Canada? If you haven't gone to Canada, go to Canada. People are the friendliest folks in the world, I think. And if you do something and you mess up, they'll apologize for it. Sorry. The seating. So this is an ideal way of seating. This was a summit that I helped put together. This was a G8 in Sea Island in 2004, back when Russia was still at the table. I do have an. Is this being recorded? I'll tell you a story. Probably shouldn't tell the story, but I'll tell it anyway. So, How many of you have ever been to Savannah, Georgia? Has anyone been to Savannah, Georgia? Raise your hand high. Raise your hand high. Okay. Savannah, Georgia in the summertime is a little bit like Bangkok, right? The temperature that day was in the high 30s. The humidity was awful, like thick as butter. It's like a knife. We had to be out on the airplane tarmac welcoming all the nations of the world who were coming. So the President of France, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Chancellor of Germany, and then arrives in the order that they came was in reverse seniority order. So there was a precedence order. In lands this Russian jet, and of course this was Vladimir Putin was president then. First go around as being president. It's hot, and he comes off, and the chief of protocol is standing right here in the U.S. And there's a arrival ceremony, and they're playing the national anthems. I don't remember the way the Russian national anthem goes, but they're playing it. And I watch, and I see Vladimir Putin do this. In the heat, he has locked his knees. And if you've ever been out in the heat and know if you lock your knees, bad things are going to happen really quickly because you lose circulation and you pass out. Well, he was doing like one of those cartoon characters, like somebody had punched, you know, and started going like this. And so I'm going to the chief. And finally he gets it, and he does exactly what you're never supposed to do in theory, right? You're never supposed to touch the principal. And so they lean over, rules are made to be broken. And so they come over here, and he grabs him from the back to straighten him, and he pops too. Stands there for the rest of the ceremony, and that's that. Goes off and he says, I think you saved me from planting my face in the Georgia asphalt, is the way he said it. I don't know where he learned, I mean, that was translated. He didn't, or interpreted. He didn't say those words in English. But literally speaking, we could have let him go, and the next thing you know, the big thing of the story would have been, President of Russia falls down in Georgia asphalt. And everyone been looking at me and said, why'd you make it so hot? But this table here is meant to be circular so that leaders could talk to one another. And look how much more friendly that is. Think about function. When you think about protocol, keep in mind that what we're doing is focusing on the function so that the leaders can focus on the substance. That's important to realize. That form drives substance in this case. And when you have something like this, think about how they can actually communicate with one another because they're looking at one another. How many times have you been in meetings where you can't even, or lectures or whatever, you can't even be a part of what's going on because you don't have direct line of sight to somebody? All right? And then sometimes we make it so difficult people can't even see. This poor woman, I mean, this is a parade, this is meant to be a visual here, but if somebody cannot see what's going on and hear what's going on, you might as well not have the event. You might as well not do it. From a diplomat's perspective, this is the worst thing in the world. If you can't see and hear what's going on, you might as well quit, all right? Now, common courtesy. We've been exposed to this already. But words like please and thank you do go a long way in diplomatic parlance, right? In diplomatic affairs, really, it's the people who can be the most charming without being flirty, over charming, the people who let you know that they're listening to you, that they're intent with you, and that display courtesy, like this one. How many of you have ever been in this situation where you've shown up to an event and 40 more people who are supposed to that are supposed to be there show up? This is a major issue in diplomatic circles, believe it or not. There are certain countries that will not be named whose diplomats do not let you know they're coming to something. And then they show up and have a whole slew of people with them. This is problematic if you're catering. This is problematic if you're doing a seating chart. I have quit doing seating charts at times because I don't know. Some people are just rude and don't let you know they're coming. So why do people show up? Where are you supposed to put them? Where are you supposed to sit on them? People come, I'm sorry, there's no room for you. Come sit here in the back. What if there are high-ranking people? I'm sorry, you didn't say. Well, you can't do that. In some cases, that's disrespectful. In some cases, you'll create a broader international incident. So you always have to have a spare table. You always have to have a seat open. It's easier to put somebody who's a staff in a seat to make it look full than it is to try to add and shoehorn in, squeeze in an extra place setting. I mean, I was in a country one time and I learned the hard way. We did a seated meal at dinner, evening time. One person RSVP'd. I thought, well, we should just cancel the thing. They said, no, other people will come. We had invited 40. 175 people showed up. I'm not joking. 175 people. And when we debriefed them, they said, well, in our culture, when you invite us for dinner, it means the whole family can come. And let me tell you, the whole family meant the whole family. Everybody under the roof came. I learned my lesson the hard way. We only had lunches thereafter, and we did it by buffet in that country, right? Because we just didn't have enough food. We ran out of food, which is embarrassing, but what are you supposed to do? You're planning for 40 and 175 show up. Then you're running out to the KFC to get as many buckets of chicken as you can and bring them in. Try to put them on a nice platter and put some little green stuff in there. Honest, we made this in the back. Honest. Tastes like the Colonel's recipe. All right? Now, if you got a smartphone, raise it up. I think every human being in this room has one. This has changed the life of a diplomatic officer for the good and for the bad at the same time. Now, what are the good ways that this has changed? Anybody?
You can always Google someone and kind of check up credentials and things in the background if you're unsure.
You can stalk them. Find out what's going on, right? Be sophisticated in your intelligence gathering. All right? What's another good way? What's something good?
Constant communication.
Constant communication. So you're never outside of their mind. What else? Yes?
If you're like unsure about protocol, you can like Google it maybe and
A cheat sheet, right? An easy form of saying, am I doing this right, Google? What else could be good from a diplomatic point of view?
The ability to reach citizens in a more accessible manner.
To control the message and get it out. It's the combination of being in constant contact, but saying what you want to say and controlling the message. What else? Oh, and by the way, visuals, right, are very powerful. Someone sees a photograph on Instagram, it gives them an idea of what's going on. That's even more powerful than a 280-character tweet. So, what else? Yes?
Google Translate can be helpful now.
That's right. Hold that thought, though, in about 3 or 4 slides, all right? Google Translate, and you are going to be good friends in just a second. Now look at this photograph. The top one in 2005 was the night that Benedict was elected Pope, Joseph Ratzinger. And then the bottom one is taken from almost the exact same location the night that Cardinal Bergoglio became Pope Francis. Oh my goodness. In just 8 years, the entire scene in St. Peter's Square changed because of smartphones. Look at that. They're not even looking at him on the balcony. They're like, let me put it here. Because this proves I was here. This is the bad of social media. Because when you make a mistake, how quickly is it known? Yesterday, right? It's known before it even finishes. There's a very famous, I didn't put it in here because she's too good of a friend and didn't want to embarrass her. There's this funny scene where the former U.S. Chief of Protocol, Capricia Marshall, was awaiting the arrival of the Mexican president for a state dinner that President and Mrs. Obama were hosting. And she slipped and fell on the marble of the White House stairs and just landed right on her backside, with all of the cameras going, flashbulbs popping, videos everywhere. And she just pops right up and laughs about it and dusts herself off, ha 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 ha. But that's what made the news the next day, right? Not the president arriving and the beautiful arrival ceremony and what people were wearing. And oh, it was Ambassador Marshall plastering herself on the marble. That's what social media, and that is the big, grave danger in protocol or in diplomatic circles. Whatever you do, it winds up the next day or the next instant on the front, trending. I was almost saying front page, but it's not front page anymore. Trending on Twitter, trending on Facebook, or wherever else it may be. So, as a diplomatic person with a diplomatic career, or any career, if you don't want to even go into diplomacy, you have to watch your social media feed, because that stuff follows you around like a little puppy dog behind, and it's cute and wonderful when you're doing it, and then all of a sudden it comes and nips you on the heel as you get a little older, because there's a record of everything. And that's what happens in diplomatic circles. And if you don't believe me, please pay attention to what just happened with the British ambassador in the United States. If you haven't heard this story, how many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you have been paying attention to the news? The British ambassador sent some cables back to the UK that had some interesting language used to describe the incumbent president of the United States, and that set off a row between the United States and Britain, and eventually led to Ambassador Derek resigning, I think it was yesterday or the day before, being probably before he was recalled by his government at some point in time, even though they said they were going to be okay with it without the May government, and probably be a Boris Johnson government in a couple of weeks, and it's likely to change. So these things matter. These things matter. Okay. Now, in diplomatic protocol, you have to become best friends with security, because they will change everything you do if you don't watch out. How many times, JJ, have you had something planned and security come in and said, nope, they can't come in and do it this way, right? The king has to walk this way. The prime minister has to come over here. And it creates a nightmare. Now, look at this nice photograph here. This man is standing outside. It's actually not standing outside Buckingham Palace. CNN got that wrong. Standing outside the hospital where the Duchess of Cambridge was safely delivered of Prince George. And he comes out and stands right in front of the door of the hospital wing where she was, with two armed police officers on either side. He pulls out a scroll and a bell, and like a town crier, he starts going, ding, 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 hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. And he reads this proclamation about the princess being safely, the Duchess being safely delivered of a baby boy. And all the cameras are, everyone's, oh, this is great. Oh, ooh, this is fantastic. Nobody moves, the police officers let it go, and that's it. He walks off. Ladies and gentlemen, this man had nothing to do with Buckingham Palace. He was not a member of the household staff of the royal family. He was not a member of the British government. He was a man from some small town in the Lake Country who had come down. Y'all, he has handcuffs as one of his lapel pins up here. He's dressed like he comes out of Pirates of Penzance or something like that. I want to be a pirate in the Pirates of Penzance, wearing silver buckle slippers and metallic shiny pants. That's what he looks like! And nobody does anything! Nobody does anything! Two heirs to the throne are just beyond those bricks. And this guy comes on and says, guess what? A baby's been born! And everybody, including the police and the media, were bamboozled and thought he was supposed to be there. This is a true story. This is an absolute true story. Where was security? In this day and age, anyone in diplomatic protocol cannot overlook the importance of the relationship you have with security and those planning security. We don't like to think the worst will happen, but all it takes is one time, right? Protocol officers have to get everything right all the time and never get celebrated for it, but then the one time something goes wrong, what happens? It's with anything in any profession, right? You want to get a perfect score, but the one time you don't get a perfect score, you get knocked for it. What's the same thing with security? Let them in on your planning process early, because they will change it if you don't let them in. No. By the way, has anyone ever seen this meme, the grumpy cat? I put this in here just because, listen, you all are right probably at the tail end of being millennial generation. I want to hitch my wagon to whatever good business idea you have. This cat just died in the United States, just died. You know what this cat's net worth was? $380 million US. Do you hear me? $380 million US when this cat died. That's what this cat's owner did for taking a picture of this cat, and it became an internet sensation on calendars and coffee mugs and t-shirts. So if any of you have a pet that has tendencies like this, let me know. I will be an early investor. I'll give you $20 right now. Let me in on the ground level, all right? All right, a couple of more things, and then I want to take your questions. Oh, listen, y'all. Don't use flags. Just take it from an expert. They are painful because most people get them wrong. And you can really, 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 really offend somebody by using flags incorrectly, okay? Sorry. So sorry. What makes this worse is in my hometown of Atlanta, this was way back in a baseball World Series, Game 1 in 1992. This is the Marine Corps bringing out these flags. The flags are in the wrong order to begin with. That's a whole other thing. But then they fly it upside down. And in international flag protocol, there's only one acceptable time when you can fly a flag upside down. It's when you're at war with that nation. We weren't at war with Canada in 1992. We hadn't been at war with Canada since 1814. And the end of the War of 1812. And then it was Britain we were mad at, not Canada. Oops. Now, I'll show you this one. How many know who this man is? Anybody? John Kerry, I heard the name. He was former Secretary of State of the United States. Now you'll notice this, in most nations, the national flag goes to, as the audience would look at it, the leftmost position. In protocol, we say nothing goes to the flag's right. But as the audience looks at it, the national flag should be over here. This is the State Department flag. So these flags are in the wrong order. Right? This is the State Department. So I called them. I called a friend of mine and I said, by the way, I took this picture. This was on the front page of the New York Times above the fold. I said, the flags are wrong. And a friend of mine who's there, her name's Kim, she said, no, they cut the picture wrong. And she sent me the right picture. And she sent me this picture. And I said, Kim, the flags are still wrong! And they are! Because they're used as decorations. Flags should never be used as decorations. One set of flags, right? Now, all of our countries do it. I am not casting criticism. How many of you have ever seen an event in your country, particularly with politicians, where there's 736 flags behind you? Right? Right? I've seen it in some of the news. How many Aussies are here? Y'all had like 103 prime ministers in the last year. And I see them all, like with all around having the flags, like Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. And we're looking at it and we're like, what? There's like 9 million flags behind me. No, that does not make you more patriotic. It does not make you more Australian. It just makes you want to look like it. Voters. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're Australian, right?
I am Australian. I just wanted to say that I'm sure any other Australians here would have seen it. Usually when the government is pushing something that's quite deemed as patriotic, or I would deem as more nationalistic, that's when they tend to have hundreds of flags behind them. So you'll see it when our Homeland Security, they created that about a couple of years ago, and it was a really big deal. And that's when you'll find all of those flags.
Yeah. So you can see it in any country, and it's usually when people want to wrap themselves around the flag for a cause. Well, in protocol, the whole reason that this rule exists is that so people don't wrap themselves in the flag, right? It's because the flag is supposed to represent a sovereign people. A sovereign people. It's not supposed to be decoration. You're not supposed to have 913 flags showed up. And in some countries, including my own, it's not supposed to be on apparel. It's not supposed to be used as napkins at your National Day celebration or anything along those lines. Yet we do it. Now, every country has different rules, right? But there are some very, very important rules about flag flying. Now, this is the Olympics. This was when in Rio, when Michael Phelps, one of his last races, and he tied a Singapore swimmer who had idolized Michael Phelps won, and he tied with Laszlo Shea from Hungary and Kloe from South Africa, and they decided, well, they all won the silver medal, and they put the flags like this. This is wrong on so many levels because you're never supposed to stack national flags on one another. You want to cause a diplomatic problem? Treat people's flags like this. But I actually did contact the IFC. I know you're shocked after this presentation. No, I actually had the gumption to call them. And they said, well, it was up to the Swimming Federation. So I called the Swimming Federation, and they gave me a bogus answer. They said, well, we just thought that was the importance that they should go with. Well, no! First of all, they're tied. So there are many sports who have ties, and they run them horizontally, right? Not vertically. But even if that were the case, the official alphabet or alphabetical order in Olympics is either in French, in English, or the host country's language, in this case, Portuguese. And none of the three languages is this the alphabetical order of these three. So it matters. It matters. Remember what I told you about the North Korean and South Korean flags to start. Things like this matter. This is a problem on multiple levels, right? First, you have no idea what's in order, right? Flags should generally go in alphabetical order. If you go outside New York or here, anywhere where there's a UN building, the flags are in alphabetical order, usually by English, but not always. Here, how do you know what the order is? And then you have flags up here like the Saudi flag, which should never, ever, ever, never, ever, 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 never, ever, 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 never be hung vertically. It should be hung horizontally because of what's written on the flag, right? And so then you have other flags up here, are flags of not even full nations that have diplomatic recognition, which that becomes a huge issue. How many of you, well, those of you at universities sometimes probably see this because universities like to make political statements and say, we'll support somebody from fill-in-the-blank place even though they don't have political sovereignty based on our government. That can get you a lot of problem in diplomatic circles. So if your nation doesn't recognize another nation as sovereign, and then you have institutions that are flying the flags, it can be quite problematic. You see where that can be a kind of a tension. Now you see why I say stay away from flags. They're great, but they're no good for things like this. Just stay away from them. And then this one, I don't mean to pick on the Russians again, but I will. Because this was the G20 summit the year before Russia was excluded from any of those summits. And they used flags as toe marks on the ground for the world leaders to stand. This is Erdogan going and bending down, and the Turkish flag, well, it wasn't just the Turkish flag, all their flags were on the ground. So imagine if they took your flag of your country and put it on the ground and people were just stepping all over it and staying right here, you know? Big problem. Big problem. Don't use flags. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't use flags. Oh, that was weak. Don't use flags. I'm serious. All right? Now, briefing your principal. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you've had to brief somebody? Give a briefing of an event. All right, what event was it?
It was an event where members of our parliament were speaking on a parliament session.
Yep.
So I was responsible for liaising with the members of parliament, basically explaining like where you're going to go, how the session's going to run, what questions are going to be asked.
That's right. Showing them how to stand, where to move, those kinds of things. Who else? You have one?
Yeah, at work, we break every morning and every lunch. Like, we break like 4 times a day.
That's a lot of briefing.
I work in Apple, so there's.
Oh, jeez. It's either that or the military one with that much briefing. Who else had one? Yes, please.
I used to work for federal politicians, so every meeting, every event, everything has to be a community meeting. What do they want?
What's the ask? Why you're there? Yep.
I used to brief my minister because we have in Malaysia Intelligent Design Institute launching. So he's meeting His Excellency, so briefing on the program and everything.
Perfect. Anybody else want to speak up? Yeah. So, yep, go ahead.
Mine's really similar to actually that I worked for my federal MP and I was in charge of her campaign, so briefing her for like when she was doing acceptances or when she was going to be in a polling booth as to what kind of constituents she was going to be meeting and what she might need to discuss.
Right. So all these things are critical. In protocol, they're doubly and triply critical because oftentimes the ceremony or the event that's happening has public eyes on it, right? There's somebody taking a picture, there's somebody recording it, there's somebody that's going to broadcast it. Now look at this photograph here. What do you notice? First of all, everyone know? Can everyone see well enough to know that's the Queen, the Queen of the United Kingdom. That's Elizabeth. Now, what do you notice about the picture? I mean, that's what I would notice straight away. Somebody sitting down on the job. What gives here? And what is the Queen doing? Look, it doesn't even matter. Now, does anyone know what's going on here?
I don't know, but I'm guessing that he wasn't briefed on how to greet her.
It's actually quite the opposite. It's actually quite the opposite. He is, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe like he fainted or something and...
So that was my initial thought, right? He had fainted. But no, we're getting closer. Yes?
Is he a Fijian then?
Yes?
That's how they greet people in
There you go. Stand up and say that so everyone can hear.
That's how people in Fiji greet superior people.
Yes. So he is a Fijian soldier who is seconded into the British military as part of the Commonwealth in a program that they allow to have. And the Queen knew that this was Fijian custom. That when someone who is superior, in this case the monarch, comes by, that the most ultimate sign of respect and greeting is to do exactly, and there's more to it. This is one photograph. If we looked at the whole series, at one point he'd be prostrate on the ground. Notice she doesn't bat an eye, right? Because she knows exactly what's going on, because she has been exceedingly well briefed to know there's a Fijian gentleman in this regiment, and that he is likely, if not certain, to greet her in this way. Because if I didn't know that, and someone hadn't briefed me, I'd be down on the ground, doing mouth to mouth. I need oxygen, what's going on? I would have been causing more problems than I would have been solving. Right? But not her, she's graceful, with dignity and aplomb, just walking by, no problem whatsoever. And there she is, and smiling. And he finishes his ritual, what he normally would do, and that's that. But if you don't brief, you bring up the opportunity for problems to creep in. So if somebody doesn't know that X is going to happen, whatever X is, then that's on us as protocol officers, because we haven't taken the time to let our principals know, and the principal's like, huh? How many of you ever seen video? Well, this recently happened. I won't say what country, but have you ever seen videos of principals trying to leave a room and not knowing where the door is? Right? There's a famous one of Obama and of Trump, both trying to find a door in China in a room And they can't do it. They are pulling handles, the door doesn't move. They look, and they're like, what? What? JJ showed the one of Chancellor Merkel having to lead the new French president on his first day of office in the receiving or the military review, right? You actually saw that when Trump went and visited Queen Elizabeth the first time on the military review, and he didn't know what to do. Now, in many cases, people have briefed these people, and they've just forgotten because they have a lot going on in their mind. That happens, right? I know from firsthand sources that Obama was briefed and knew not to talk during the national anthem, and as soon as he would say, you know, to the Queen, the national anthem would play, God Save the Queen, he just forgot. We all forget. We just don't have a million cameras looking at us and, you know, criticizing our every move. Yet, I'm sure some of you will be prime ministers and presidents one day, and then I'll criticize you on Twitter. You did it wrong! You were in front of 15 flags. I told you not to be in front of 15 flags. But you have to brief your principal. Invest in the time to brief the principal so that things like this don't happen. Now, what happened on the right-hand side has all been cleared up, and actually Her Majesty and Mrs. Obama both said, hey, no harm, no foul, right? You're not supposed to touch the Queen. Now, some of you may remember, well, you might be too young to remember one of the prime ministers of Australia who greeted the Queen and became the Lizard of Oz, was what all of the newspaper called him after he put his hands on the back of the Queen when she came down and visited. This would have been in the late 90s or so. Who was your prime minister just before Howard? It was whoever that was. That happened. Or that when Helen Clark was Prime Minister of New Zealand, her chief of protocol said, please do not wear a pantsuit to greet the Queen. Like, wear a dress. Now, I don't care, right? Whatever. That's not my business is what somebody wears. But she says, look, I promise you, if you wear your traditional pantsuit, all the media is going to talk about is how you disrespected the Queen. We may think it's archaic. We may think it's silly. I don't care in the sense that it's what people will ultimately talk about. It sucks the air out of the room. Ms. Clark, showed up in a pantsuit, and sure enough, 3 days of coverage in the New Zealand and British media was all about how she chose to wear pantsuit. Stupid, silly, in my humble opinion. But that's what people talk about, right? It moves the needle. It moves the needle from whatever should be talked about to something else. This one is a horrible mistake because the announcer at the White House said, this is President Hu, right, of China. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the national anthem of the Republic of China. Oh, yes. For those of you who may be unaware, that's not the People's Republic of China, that's Taiwan. And so President Hu said, I'm out of here, deuces, dropped the mic and left. And President Bush said, nope, come back. And the announcer corrected himself. Oops! Now hopefully in your career you will never make that egregious of a mistake. But the point is you have to brief everybody so that they'll know what to do. And then I have worse ones than this. I just didn't want to offend anybody in the audience. But I will tell you, I took a picture one time in a restroom. The sign on top of the urinal literally said the following. It had it written in Japanese, and then under it said, it said, when you are finished being happy with yourself, please clean up the area. Period. If you need assistance, contact an attendant. Well, all right then. See when this restaurant gets 5 stars. Now, interpretation is of the spoken word. Translation is of the written word. And those are two very important distinctions. If you're hiring an interpreter, it's of the spoken word. If you're hiring a translator, it's to do the written word. And they're very important because the price differential between the two is quite great. What JJ said at lunch was absolutely true. Do not let an interpreter at a meal eat. If they want to eat, fire them. Tell them to kindly move on. You can provide them with water. That's perfectly okay, but they should not be eating. And at large events, oftentimes you'll have 2 or 3 interpreters because their voice will wear out. You want them to be fresh. You can see back here behind us these booths for simultaneous interpretation that go on. You can see probably in your desk, there are probably plug-in areas for earphones and channels that you can tune to for simultaneous interpretation. Concurrent, that's also called concurrent interpretation. Concurrent interpretation happens at the exact time someone is speaking. Consecutive interpretation is, I say something, the interpreter says something. The next person says something, the interpreter says something. So it takes a longer period of time to do. All right? But you have to be careful. Hire people. And just because you're native in a language does not mean you are appropriate to do diplomatic level translations or interpretations. Because you may have grown up speaking the language, but you may not have learned the words for nuclear disarmament or the concepts like that, right? Economic concepts. Like, you don't learn that around Granny's table. So get somebody who's professional. And then, I don't know how many of you know what this is, where this was. A few of you. So the few of you who do know, don't spoil it for the rest of them. This happened when Nelson Mandela died. And at the funeral, a very dear friend of mine was the chief of protocol under de Klerk. And after apartheid, she got to know Nelson Mandela, and he loved her so much he asked her to be his chief of protocol. And she helped arrange the ceremonial parts of his funeral. She did not do this. This man was sign language interpreting for the funeral of Madiba in Johannesburg. Well, there was a big problem. First of all, you should know something is a problem when a sign language interpreter stays there for the whole 3 hours. I don't know if any of you know sign language in your language. It is tiring to do. And many times you'll see sign language interpreters trade out. Right? You'll see them 2 or 3 working a team. This person stayed there the whole time. Every world leader who was there spoke from this podium where former President Zuma is speaking now. And he interpreted. Well, there were 2 big issues. This man knew no sign language. None, 0.0, not a bit, none, do you hear me, nary a bit. He was up there doing an interpretive dance for 3 hours. Because he did not know sign language. The other thing was, and look, I am all about redemption. So this man has been a recently released convict, and not just a convict, a violent convict. And now he was up against these world leaders. Now look, folks, again, I believe in redemption, I believe in second chances, but don't you think somebody should have vetted that A, this man wasn't a security risk, and B, he actually knew sign language? That would be like me saying, come on, and I'm going to take a trip to China, and I am going to interpret into Mandarin. You know how many words of Mandarin I speak? Ni hao. Xie xie. And that's about it. All right? So I would be of no use. I saw a hand go up. Yep.
This happened in Australia as well. There was one of those, like a really bad natural disaster, and they were discussing emergency disaster relief, and they had a lady standing at the front doing sign language for an hour and a half, and she didn't know sign language.
So she was just doing, again, an interpretive
I don't know how
dance
she got in there, yeah.
for an hour and a half. It's dangerous. So trust but verify. Right? Trust but verify. And then the last thing, and then I'm going to give you a couple of sort of general ideas, and then see if you have any questions. Look, protocol's a lot of rules. But you know what people are really craving in society today? It's authenticity. That's what people really, really, really want. And the people who are the most effective leaders, be they young or be they old, no matter where they're stationed, are people who are their true and authentic selves. Those people gravitate toward that. And somewhere along the way, we've stopped having civil discourse with one another. We've sort of hidden behind social media platforms that allow us to group ourselves in like-mindedness. And if we're not okay with that, we can unfriend somebody, we can block somebody. We can lash out on Twitter, we can lash out on Facebook, we can lash out at other social media. But really what people want is authenticity. They just want you to be real with them and they with you. And when you cut through all the clutter in New York, cut through all the conversation about other things, and you just talk to one another, it's amazing how authenticity rises to the surface. And I've been watching you just today, and just the friendships you've already established with people you didn't know 3 days ago, 4 days ago, most of you didn't know. It's been astonishing to watch, but that's what the world needs. And in protocol, I always advise people, just be your authentic self. Now you'll notice the N up here is turned upside down on this scribble tile. Well, that's on purpose. Why? Because nobody's perfect. Everybody's got something about them that's just about 15 degrees off normal. Right? You know, celebrate that. That's what makes you unique and wonderful, and that's what people want. I always get frustrated in diplomatic circles where people come in and they try to serve them some fancy schmancy dinner. No. If I come to your country, I don't want a fancy schmancy dinner. I want what the locals eat. I want you to serve me what your grandmother served you. Right? Now, you can put it on fine china and give me a linen napkin. That's fine. Whatever. You can put a crystal goblet in front of me and put wine in it. Great. Fantastic. Serve me what you had at home. Why? Because then I make a connection with you. It's not about another chicken breast, another carrots and asparagus stick. It's a story because you now tell me and curate and narrate a part of your DNA to me. And when you curate and narrate that part of your DNA to me, all of a sudden I've made a bond with you. And I want to work with you. And in diplomacy, that's the only way that things get done. That's the oil that lubricates everything, is a relationship. So be authentic. One of the ways, food, I think, is the single most important trademark of one's culture. So show me your food. Now, I'm from the south of the United States. How many of you have ever been to the south of the United States by show of hands? My friend from Jamaica, I think, has been from the... Whereabouts have you been?
I've been to the Carolinas, I've been to Georgia.
Oh.
Is that too south?
Is that too south? That's perfect. Now, if you said Florida, I said that's not the south. Because the further south you go in Florida, the further north you really are, right? So, all right, who else has been to the south? Raise your hand. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Texas.
What part of Texas? Houston. Ooh, soupy hot there, too.
Yeah, very hot.
Yeah. Where, is anyone else from the south? Where are you from?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Guys. Oh, they live there now? Are they okay? There's a hurricane headed to that part of the United States. It's supposed to land Saturday into Sunday. So it's supposed to really slam into Louisiana and be really, really bad. So thoughts are with y'all. So, all right. So then, if your family's from Meridian, you ought to recognize this, right? All right. So if you come to my home, I ain't going to take you to no fancy dinner and plain Georgia English. We're going to go have something fried. No, I'm teasing about it. Well, we may. But we're going to have something that's home cooking, right? Something that my mother and my grandmother would have made. Now, you may or may not like it, and I don't care. You can smile and act like it. It doesn't matter. Because when I come to your country, I want the same thing. Because I want to experience your culture. And that's the whole reason we send diplomats out. Is so that they can understand the culture of the place they are in. And when they understand the culture of the place they are in, they can help build a bridge that solves problems related to war and peace, related to trade and economic development, related to whatever it may be. So don't be afraid to show off your food. Okay? And then don't overthink things. Another great problem that protocol officers have is they try to script everything, and in the process, they don't allow any time for spontaneity. And how many of you ever seen those spontaneous moments, and those are things you really remember? So look at this. Now look, I've had conversations in the hallway with several of you, and we've talked about what's happening politically in your country. I was joking about Australia, but not really, right? And I hope you won't paint me with a brush of one of these ignorant Americans who doesn't know anything but what's happening in his own doorstep. But I will say this. In the U.S., there's a fairly bad rap right now that the two parties don't talk to one another and we hate each other. There's walls that are up. Well, these are two people who are in the opposite spectrum ideology. And so this was at an event at the National Cathedral, and Mrs. Obama handed former President Bush a cough drop because he couldn't stop coughing. Now that's just the courteous thing to do, right? Fast forward just a little bit after that, his father died. Oh, this was at his, no, it wasn't at his mother. I forget which funeral this was at. But his father died. His father died in December. He comes down the aisle of the National Cathedral. He's the grieving son. He has to eulogize his father in about 30 minutes in this service. And he reaches over and hands to Michelle Obama a cough drop as a thank you. And it is one of those awe moments. And we become so jaded as a society that when our leaders do something like this, and all they're doing is acting human. All they're doing is repaying kindness with kindness. We think, oh, and it becomes a news story. Well, in some ways it should be a news story, because isn't that the way we should behave to one another? Isn't that the way we should act just in our daily lives? But it does go to show that no matter what things look like in your country or mine, no matter who you support or don't support, this just happens for a season, right? And that things move on. Things move on. Now, a couple of quick things. This is the advice that the diplomats I asked wanted me to translate to you all, and then I'll open up for questions. You don't know what issues tomorrow will bring, but if you have strong relationships, you can deal with anything. Seriously speaking, and JJ's probably the exact same way, and anybody else who's been a practitioner, if you don't have strong relationships to be able to call when emergencies happen or things happen, if you're not developing those right now, you're not going to have anything. I mean, I can't count the number of times I had a president. Is anybody here from Argentina? Okay. So, okay. So the most recent former president of Argentina, Cristina Kirchner. How many know who I'm talking about? Anyone know who I'm talking about? Okay, great, fantastic. Her husband, Nestor, had been president, and she became president, and Nestor died. She was a piece of work now. She was a senator, and she came to visit Georgia, and she stayed in the governor's mansion, and she almost burned the place down. So, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call, and the mansion security desk said, "Chris, you need to get out here now." I said, "I'm asleep. What's going on?" Said, Mrs. Kirchner has called and asked us for a brown tortoise shell comb and a kind of tobacco that's only sold in very, very, very specialty tobacco shops that we just don't have in stock down here in the governor's mansion at 2 in the morning. And then I mentioned a brown tortoise shell comb. Now, folks, I don't know how many of you have gone shopping for a brown tortoise shell comb at any hour, much less 2 in the morning. I said, we don't have one. Give her a comb out of the dispensary downstairs and tell her she can't smoke in the governor's mansion anyway. I got a call an hour later. "Chris, you need to get to the governor's mansion." I said, "Why?" They said, "Just get here," and they hung up the phone. So I get out of bed, cuss my way through brushing my teeth and get on something and head on out. It's about an 8-minute drive that time of night with nobody on the road. It's 3 in the morning. And I top a hill. And below me, right before the gate of the governor's mansion, there are red and blue lights flashing everywhere. Everywhere. It looked like Christmas time. And there's a scene where she is, and she had walked out and stood right by a tapestry that was about 250 years old, had lit up a cigarette and started smoking, and the smoke alarms went off, and her cigarette was dangling right by that tapestry. So the folks ran up and said, "You can't smoke, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this." She took a big drag, blew it in her face, flicked it down, and took her bare feet into the marble of the governor's bench. Put it out, I'm not joking. And so I went to see the governor and said, "I want her out of here." And I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" So I had made really close relationship with the ambassador. So I called him. I knew he was staying in Atlanta because she was down there. And I called up the ambassador who was at the Four Seasons, and I said, "You need to get the governor's mansion now." He said, "Why?" I said, "I've sent a car." So I sent a police officer, state police officer, that comes over, and I explained to him the whole situation. Now, he and I had developed a relationship over 6 months that was healthy and great, and we could tell each other anything bluntly. And he says, "I'm so embarrassed, I'll handle it." So we handled it. She made an apology, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we were scheduled to go to Argentina the next month. The governor said, "We're not going. I'm just not going." I said, "No, we can't. You know, gotta forgive." And so we show up, and you would have thought that the president had showed up. They took us as just the governor of a state in a 46 vehicle motorcade from the airport to our hotel. Everywhere we went around town, big motorcade. We went out. We went to the Casa Rosada, which is the Pink House, their version of what we would call the White House in the United States. We walked down on the balcony that Evita sang on, Eva Peron, and we're doing all these things. And it was great and wonderful, but it was all because we had a strong relationship. And I would urge you to make strongest relationships with the men and women in this room, because you don't know who's going to be the next prime minister of their country in 15, 20, 25, 30 years. I'm not joking. You don't know who's going to be a legislator, a parliamentarian from their country. You don't know who's going to be a successful business person. You don't know who's going to be an academic researcher who has a novel theory that you can come present at a conference. You have no idea who these people are going to be, because you don't know yourself. And if any of you tell me you know what you want to be when you grow up, we need to have a counseling session after this is over. Because I am 100 years old and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and nor should you know what you want to be. I have intellectual wanderlust, and my suspicion is most of you do too. That you want to try new things, see new things, have new adventures. So don't forsake the relationship part of it. We've already covered this one. Treat everyone with respect. Don't assume anything at all, ever, gets done. One of my very most horrible, horrendous experiences was when I was a junior protocol officer, and I assumed that somebody had put in the catering order for an event. And I had 40 hungry people and no food. And I don't mean what happened in the country I'm not supposed to mention. I meant an event right there that when former President Carter was going to be at it, and we had no food. None. Who do you think was racing down to the supermarket to see what they had prepared? Give me one of those rotisserie chickens. No, give me 15 of those rotisserie chickens, right? And crackers and cheese, and so it was the most unorthodox meal. But you cannot assume that somebody else has done it. Always verify. Find a mentor. I mean, whatever you want to do, but I will challenge you, don't just find a professional mentor, right? Find somebody who will challenge you in all ways. Because a professional mentor is great. They'll make connections for you. They'll link you up. They'll challenge you into what you should be doing to prepare for the field ahead. But find somebody who can be a personal mentor as well. Somebody who can help you through whatever it is you're going through. Good or bad. Good or bad. And then the last two. Listen. I think that maybe the single thing most wrong with us in the world today is that we seek first to be understood rather than seeking first to understand. So listen to one another. Put down your phones and have meaningful conversations. In diplomacy, that is the root of everything, is the ability to listen actively, to reflect to that person that you understand what they're saying, and then to take what you've learned and help build a relationship with that person. And if you don't listen, if all you want to do is get your ideas out on the table, it's going to limit where you go in life really, really quickly. Because people will look at you and say, they only care about themselves. That's all they want to do. So I would challenge you to become an active listener. And if you don't know those skills, it's easy to find. Google it. The body language that you use, the questions that you ask that are reflexive back to that person. Not repeating what they say, but say, so what I hear you saying is, and put it in your own words, and you're more likely to get it right. It's like saying somebody's name. How many of you would say to yourself, I have trouble remembering people's names? Honest to goodness, raise your hand. Raise your hand high. Go ahead. Raise. Okay. Liars, all of you. I'm teasing. There is a really great way to remember people's names. Scientific study shows us over and over again, that to commit something from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, you need to say it 3 to 4 times within a 60-second span. So when you go and meet somebody and say, hello, my name is Chris, and you say, Julian? Nice to meet you, Julian. So Julian, tell me where you're from. Perth. So that's in the western part of Australia, right, Julian? Now see, I'm saying it over and over again. It sounds stupid, right? But the point is, I'm making a connection as I'm talking, and I'm saying it over and over so I don't forget his name. That's the easiest way to do it. Just repeat it. But the problem is we don't listen enough to their name in the first instance because we're thinking about what we want to say back to them already, instead of listening to what Julian has to say and what his life story is, and how he's rescued many little children from drowning rivers, or any kind of narrative I'm going to spin here. Is that all right? All right? So listen, but then ask questions. Good Lord, be nosy in a good way. You never know things until you ask questions. And I know that sounds like 5th grade, stuff that you hear, but it's true in the diplomatic world. The best diplomats ask questions and get information from you, and you don't even know that they've done it. It's like a pickpocket out on the streets. They've taken your wallet and all of your information, and you are smiling the whole way because they've charmed you. Okay? So, those are some simple life lessons. I'm going to pause here. I want to end up with a story and just say, I'll see if anyone has any questions generally speaking about anything I've said. You've done wrong too. Either one, whichever way you want to take the verb. Don't just say that. Say, this was wrong. Let's talk about why it happened and how we can fix it. Now, the difference between an honest mistake and a big full-blown issue. That's a judgment call that's sometimes very, very hard to make. And I would say, it sounds like an easy way out for me to say this, but it truly is situational. Now, what I would say, if it causes ethical issues, if it causes a compromise of somebody's personal beliefs or national beliefs, whatever that ethos is, human rights, it doesn't matter. Whatever, if it is a compromise, that's big enough to address in a more public or a more substantive way. But if it's something that doesn't fall in those categories, where maybe it's embarrassing, but it's not a compromise of ethics, it's not a compromise of rights, of civil liberties, it's not a compromise of civil discourse or something like that, I tend to recommend that be dealt with more privately, more discreetly, immediately, but let it go. It's like disciplining a child. You don't want to discipline a child for doing something wrong 6 weeks after it happens, because then the lesson's not learned, right? After the child runs out into the street and you don't want to run out of the street, you need to have that conversation with them right when it happens, or right after it happens. So that's how I would generally handle it. Other questions? Yes, please. Yes, please.
So how do you kind of recover from these protocol mistakes that are made with social media spreading information so quickly? Like, do you try to come back and fix it, or do you just kind of?
What was the last part of what you said?
So how do you recover from the protocol mistakes with social media spreading information so quickly?
So, so there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is just let it go, because if you let it, if you say more about it, you draw attention to it. How many of you? So I'll give you an example where they didn't let it go and it caused a problem. How many of you remember the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris that happened 3 or 4 years ago, approximately? Okay. Well, how many remember they had a huge march that lots of diplomats came to and went to afterwards? Lots of people. Well, the United States didn't send anybody. Well, the problem with that was France is our oldest diplomatic ally, right? They were the first country to recognize us. They sent to our war for independence. They sent troops, and we didn't send anybody. 200 plus years we've been allies. They sent nobody. So Secretary Kerry goes over there after the fact, shows up, and flies over James Taylor, the musician. And they're sitting up on stage with President Hollande. And James Taylor begins to sing, "You've Got a Friend." I can't make this stuff up. So he begins to sing, "You've Got a Friend." That's trying too hard when there's been a mistake, right? It's better just to apologize and get on with it. So how do I do it with something like that on social media? If it is truly an issue, address it and move on. Let that one comment stand, and like with anything else. Oops, we're sorry, we've taken corrective action, and move on. And let it be. Because the more you keep going back to it and drawing attention to it, the more problems you'll have. Right? Any other? Yes, please.
Hi, sorry, so I have 2 questions. The first one is, so how did you get to where you are now? So from academia and all the other jobs you've had. And the second,
I can't keep a job, that's the real answer.
And the second question is, you mentioned the diplomatic passport. Does that, it's just out of curiosity, does that passport allow you to travel to like more restricted countries and areas without being prosecuted?
Yeah. So I'll take the second one first and then the first one. Does a diplomatic passport let you travel to places that are more restricted without being prosecuted or in trouble? Well, the answer to that, broadly speaking, is you're not supposed to go anywhere on a diplomatic passport unless you're on assignment to go to that place. And if you're on assignment to go to that place and that country recognizes that diplomatic passport, either from a country or from the United Nations or from another multinational organization like the EU, whatever the case may be, then yes, it does allow you to enter and exit the country, but you still have certain restrictions even though you may carry diplomatic immunity. Even though you may be not prosecuted for parking your car illegally, if you go out and murder somebody, you still can be prosecuted, right? Diplomatic immunity is not blanket immunity under the Vienna Convention, consular relations. But what I would also say is you can only travel that on official assignment. Like you can't go out, I can't on a diplomatic passport say, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to go to the Bahamas for the weekend. I'm just going to use my diplomatic passport to go. That's a big no-no, unless you are officially traveling or in transit some way using your passport officially. So, yeah. So she asked, what if you're there on for political, are you, I want to show one thing first. So, can it come back down? That's probably my signal to shut up. But I want to show you one thing before we do. Thank you. If you're there for political, for a political assignment, again, that goes back to, are you allowed in the country in the first place to be for inspections, for human rights, for refugees, whatever you're doing? You have to be asked, like a diplomat can't just show up in the country. They have to be asked there. So in theory, the answer to your question is yes. That's a theory. You can't control what governments are going to do once you're there, right? So you could be there and then all of a sudden they say, we really don't like what you're doing. So either leave or we're going to throw you in jail. So how did I get, I'll answer this question, then finish up with what I'm going to say. And then I'll be around, you can ask me questions later. How did I get to where I am? Well, you know, so you don't go to any university for career day. What's that? What's that?
Close it up now.
Yeah. So you don't go to any university for career day and show up and go to a protocol booth, right? I literally got handed a portfolio when I worked for the governor and said, you'd be really good at this. Do it. That's literally how it happened. Right place, right time, people said here. And then I just started studying and learning. And So I would say that I have never had a, think about it, I've never had a job in my life where the job description was written before I took the job. I actually created or wrote almost even jobs that I took that were in formal organizations. I was hired to do the job because I helped create the job. And so that's non-normative. I'm not suggesting that's a normative way of going about it, but I am suggesting that there's power in network, and there's power in how you get to know people, and in sort of charting a path forward that you want to take by going to meeting and learning from the right people, and then sometimes forcing the doors open that you want to force open. So I'll show you this, and then I'll shut. So this is my organization that actually I'm here. It's PDI-POA. There's information up here I'll pass around, and so I will just divide this up, and you mind throwing those around. If any of you want to know more about protocol, more about the industry, please do let us know, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And you can follow me anytime. That's my Twitter address is Chris Young ATL. And then there's a long story behind this, but my Instagram is @2ndLarry. There's a long story behind that. So please do follow me, and I'll follow you back. And happy you can follow my journeys all around the world and yours. So thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.